Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I'm going to be going through this article that was basically written about the state of Retribution Paladins in the War Within, so basically on the beta currently, and as we get closer and closer to pre-patch and closer to the expansion releasing. So this article came out yesterday. I would have done this yesterday, but I really wanted to do my thoughts on the Season of Discovery, so I did that instead. But I'm going to go through this now, and for multiple reasons. One reason being, Bolas is the writer of this. He writes the guides on wowhead. I know before he hasn't. I don't believe he does like any content or anything like this, but he's a very important member of the Retribution Paladin community. I think he has other people that work with him or in tandem with him, but he does like the simulation craft for Ret Paladin, and he comes up with like the rotation basically, right? If you want to call it that. Move priority, and I trust him so much on that I just basically use it. Like I not basically I do. I'll literally pull up his wowhead and say, hey, this is Bolas's. This is the order of which to use your moves. I will have slight disagreements sometimes, basically because in practice sometimes things work differently than in simulations. So very rarely I'll say, well, you could actually use this instead if you want. It works. You can parse while doing it. So occasionally I'll throw something like that in there. But he's just a very trusted member. And like I said, this came out yesterday, so I have read through it once already. And basically what you're going to see is you're going to see that he agrees with a lot of the stuff I say, or I agree with a lot of stuff he says. But if you're watching my videos, then you probably already heard me say this stuff before he ever wrote this or anything like that. And that's a good thing, because if you trust me for Ret Paladin stuff, and you see this other guy who's doing Ret Paladin simulation crafts and all that kind of stuff agreeing with me, that means we're probably correct, right? And if you are someone who trusts Bolas and this is your first time on my channel, just know that I pretty much agree with most of the things in here, and I'll mention if I don't agree with something. So yeah, this is we'll go through this. I'll try not to read every little part because I have read through this. I skimmed through it, and we'll kind of talk about this stuff and see if I agree and give my own thoughts on it as well. So secondary stat improvements is kind of his first thing here, and so Retribution has had issues with secondary stats. So basically, in Dragonflight, what end up happening? We're just stacking versatility. This is also something that's not going to be mentioned in here, which is very pertinent, and this is the perfect time to talk about it, I suppose, is we're stacking versatility in Dragonflight, and we're not stacking versatility in the War Within. Our defensiveness has gone down a lot because of this. If you are in endgame, high-end gear on Dragonflight right now, you likely have 30-something% verse. Not everybody. Some people are playing around with different builds, and that's fine, right? But a lot of people are going to have 30% plus verse. I know, and like at one point at least, I don't know if my current set of gear, at one point I had like 38% verse. That's 19% damage reduction. Okay, so then if you have like 3% verse on the War Within, right, that's 17.5% less damage reduction. And that's a lot, and it adds up a lot over the course of a dungeon, over the course of the raid. People aren't talking about it enough, but it's real and it's pertinent. So he first talks about crit scaling here, and that's because of, or lack of crit scaling. That's because we had abilities that made like Hammer of Wrath crit, our auto attack, or Crusader Strike crit. So we lost a lot of value from our crit because of that. Because if something's auto critting, what's the point of stacking crit, right? This also was awkward because it was still better to use 1 minute wings, even though that gave you crit. So it was a little bit awkward there as well. Not a lot of synergy in that case. Also, it's something we talk about here a lot on this channel is how bad mastery was in Dragonflight. And I have mentioned already, of course, how much better mastery is in the War Within, because it actually will scale up and it's worth more, and mastery is a good thing. You know, like it's almost certainly going to be worth more than verse. So that's why, again, I think you'll have quite low verse most of the time. The way mastery works now. So we have a little bit more value from crit, and we have a lot more value from mastery. So overall, these stat changes are definitely a step in the right direction. However, one talent that still has issues secondary is Templar Strikes, which still has a static 1 second GCD that isn't reduced by haste. So this basically doesn't allow haste scaling for Templar Strikes. So as you get more haste, it actually makes Crusader Strike auto attack better because you're going to auto attack faster, and yet Templar Strikes doesn't get benefit from it. You could also say, well, Crusading Strike auto attack doesn't get benefit from Wind Fury, and you can still have benefit from Wind Fury while you have Templar Strikes, which is true. But yeah, it's like, but the fact that Wind Fury doesn't benefit you with Crusading Strike auto attack is just a dumb thing. So it's like not really a good argument, I guess, either. So that's why haste, that's just one example. Haste does scale pretty fine with us overall, but yeah, it definitely doesn't help Templar Strikes. You know, some people, I would assume Bolas is just a Templar Strikes enjoyer, is why he would throw this in here. If you're Crusader Strike auto attack enjoyer, then you wouldn't really care about this point. It's not a big point, but it is true. Removal of Retribution Aura. We all know, if you follow the channel, you all know how I feel about this. And he's basically going to say the same things, right? Basically getting rid of it because there was 2 buffs from Paladins. However, this was something that made a lot more likely to make it into a raid, because you're pretty much, he's basically going to talk about how you're always going to have a Holy Paladin in your raid, and because of Aura Mastery, basically, like Holy Paladin just typically has the best tools. There are times when Prot Paladin has some cool tools as well, but you're almost always going to have like a Holy Paladin in your raid, and so they're going to bring the Diva Aura. And so Retribution Aura was a chance to bring a Prot Paladin or a Rep Paladin. But now it's just like, well, we don't need to bring either. And so he's making that point. Now this is really mostly a case at like higher end guilds, but a lot of even heroic guilds like mimic higher end guilds and can do that. He also talks about how, you know, Prot has Blessing of Spell Warding, which is basically a buff as well, which then just leaves Ret with our basic stuff, Protection, Freedom, and Sacrifice. But that's, again, things that the other Holy has. You could bring another Holy Paladin. You could bring another, you could bring a Pot Paladin and still have these things. We have, Rep Paladin have actually nothing unique. And, you know, this is something I talked about too. It just, the removal of Retribution Aura, even though it wasn't unique to us, it gave us a lot better chance of being useful in a raid. And now for my raid, right, the only thing useful I'm going to bring is that I don't die and that I will do close to the top amount of damage that my spec can do. And so if we're tuned bad, right, that might not be very good, right, if we're not tuned very high. And so that feels bad. Now maybe there'll be a fight where one of these abilities is actually useful or like needed, and that'll be good, but yeah, that's a little bit rough. So again, we're in full agreement on this, and I will post, I should have mentioned this already, but I will post the link to this if you want to read through all of Bolas's thoughts here. But yeah, we're basically in full agreement on this. AoE talent changes. One of the consistent problems with Ret has been inability to take talents for AoE without losing substantial amount of single target damage, and vice versa. There's been a few different approaches and iterations over the course of the War Within beta to attempt to address this so far, with the initial positive changes including reducing the impact of Execution Sentence and Final Reckoning node to improve the relative strength of AoE builds on single target, moving the 5% Holy Strike damage bonus from Divine Arbiter to Blades of Light to reduce the reliance on Divine Arbiter and single target and Mythic Plus, and secondary stat changes that will likely make single target damage less reliant on Trinket and other proc effects buffed by versatility. So this goes back to the very first point he's making, where so I'm also telling you the bad side of this, right? We have a lot less verse. Our survival is a lot lower. It's still not terrible, but like if you're probably, if you're on Dragonflight right now and you're still playing Season 4, you're probably just tanking. You're not dying. This is not quite the case on War Within beta. But however, with all that verse comes a lot of trinket damage, a lot of other effect damage, a lot of frac axe damage, right? These things, the things that are buffed by versatility, outside things buffed by versatility, are the reason why we had to use that ring, the Onyx Amulet, into Season 2, because we had so much verse that it was just good until they nerfed it, right? Other early changes, Vanguard of Justice, which we obviously lost, and we got Holy Flames, which he's going to talk about. Judge Jury, which they nerfed, but again, it's still a cleave talent that we have, and before we didn't have one, so it's still better to use in cleave situations unless AoEing's better. But even if AoEing is better for overall damage, it's like, and what I would say if it was my guy, it'd be like, hey, if all you care about is your parse, AoE. If you care about, you know, prog or getting the kill, then use Judge Jury and use your single target, right? If that ends up being the case, where AoE is still better than taking that talent, it's at least an option, right? And we didn't have that option before. This, of course, the next thing is something that I've been championing on the channel here is Blessed Champion moved to 1 point instead of 2. This frees up a point. It's just a great change. Like that was a big thing we needed for our AoE builds. Now he seems really high on Holy Flames, whereas I kind of have a different view of it. One thing worth noting is that Holy Flames is now a choice node with Blade of Vengeance, which is a bit of a shame since Blade of Vengeance was a really nice talent to swap to for AoE, but is likely now just completely outclassed. Now I know Bolas is very, 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 very much more into raiding than Mythic Plus, and maybe that's what he's saying this from. But I think Blade of Vengeance right now would still be much like the way, from what I've seen, Blade of Vengeance, and I had some good comments from some people who were trying to do a little bit of math and stuff, and I don't know, maybe they aren't mathematicians, but I think Blade of Vengeance is probably still better for AoEing in pretty much every case with current tuning. What I will say is if Holy Flames got buffed, the way Holy Flames works, that if it like got buffed, then all of a sudden it would be better in everything, because it like does a little bit of everything randomly. And so if it got buffed in some way, if it got buffed to keep on 100% uptime on Blade of Vengeance or on your Xberg, right? If it got buffed to do that, then it would be like the best thing, I guess. But I don't know. It's hard to say. It's we definitely don't view it the same, but maybe he's talking about it from only raid, because I could definitely see Holy Flames being used in raid, especially on a fight where you only want to press Final Verdict. So a fight where you're taking Judge Jury, I could see you maybe taking Holy Flames as well, to just do that little bit more prio damage and not worry so much about your ad damage, right? But if all you care about is your ad damage, then I think you might still take Blade of Vengeance the way things are tuned right now. So at this moment, the changes made should result in a talent tree that is much more accommodating to hybrid builds. That's true, because we actually have, like I just said, we actually have a talent that is a hybrid talent. So that's the first thing. The situation in the War Within is unlikely to be quite as bad. Single target talent points you drop are important as they used to be, but some buffs to the marginal AoE talents like Judge Jury and Empyrean Power would definitely help. I agree. Judge Jury getting nerfed was rough for sure, especially by how much it got nerfed, because this was actually probably going to be a viable Mythic Plus thing to take, whereas I don't really think it is anymore. You can still take it if you're just doing it for fun, right? And you don't care about numbers or you don't run damage meters or whatever. It's a fun talent, right? Just in general. But yeah, like it was nerfed so heavily that I'm not going to recommend to use it in Mythic Plus, because I think you'll just be throwing on trash, honestly. Empyrean Power is actually sneaky good. So Empyrean Power right now with Crusader Strike auto attack. So the way Crusader Strike auto attack is right now, and you have the 40% increased attack speed, it's actually really sneaky good in Mythic Plus right now, because you're auto attacking a lot, right, with that 40% increased attack speed, and that's your Crusader Strike, right? So Crusader Strike has a chance to proc a free thing. It's actually sneaky good right now, but it would have to be, you have to have that specific instance, right? Because you're never gonna be, because you press Templar Strikes when it's up, but it's not really up enough to, it doesn't AoE. So like it's weird because Templar Strikes doesn't really fit with your AoE skill set that much, but you still kind of want to press it. And then Crusader Strike, if you take neither of those talents, you're only pressing Crusader Strike when you absolutely have to. So, but with Crusader Strike auto attack, you're always auto attacking. So without losing a GCD, you're proccing Free Divine Storms, and you're hitting so much that it's actually proccing a decent amount. So again, this isn't necessary. Again, he might be thinking of it from a rating perspective or something like that. I don't know. But in Mythic Plus, it's not too bad right now. I've been using it because of that fact, because I'm using CSAA with that new 40% attack speed or whatever, and it's really, really nice. AoE that could be somewhat hybridized. So he's talking about hybridizing some talents. This isn't something I've talked about a lot, but this is true. Like, all of our talents could use this, if you want to be completely honest. Like, Tempest is a Lightbringer, only helps AoE. Rush of Light, it's really mostly good for single target, right? But yeah, so that, oh yeah, single target holy power abilities. So Rush of Light's only for single target. Tempest Lightbringer's only for AoE. So doing something to hybridize those, of course, would be good. That's just true. No real other way to think about that one. Removal of quality of life bonuses. So he's going to talk about Crusader's Reprieve. This is something I see talked about a lot. A lot of people ask me on the channel, hey, is our melee range shorter? Hey, how does this melee range shorter feel? I've been asked that probably like 20 times at this point. And it's true. It did Crusader's Reprieve was really, really good. That gave us a little bit extra range or whatever, and also healed ourselves. This is more defensiveness that we lost in a way. It also made our Crusader Strike heal ourselves as well. And so we lost that. And he's going to bring up the exact point I made at some point. Was it here? It might be in here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the range, it was said, and this is the exact thing I said, so I'm glad we agree so much on this, but it was said that we were getting extra range and we're not having our mobility iterated on during the rework back into the beginning of Dragonflight, right? We were not getting any kind of improvement to movement. Instead, we were getting more range on our abilities to try to like combat that in a unique way. And it kind of worked. I still would prefer to have something better than horse, or another option better than horse or something. But it did kind of work. And so this does feel bad. It's not too awful. Everybody else has to deal with it too as melee, but they are right. Like, what do they need to give us like an extra couple seconds on our horse, an extra, something, right? They need to, like, if we're told we're not getting our movement enhanced because of this auto attack, because of our attack range. Well, in that case, we need to have something. If you take away some of our attack range, then we need to get some movement back. And that's just reality, because that's what they said, and they're completely going back on that, honestly. Aegis of Protection has been effectively removed since it's moved to a choice noble with Shield of Vengeance. That's also true. You're pretty much always going to want to have two defensives instead, like two good defensives instead of one Omega defensive. And in almost every case, there are, like, it depends what level of content you're doing, right? If you're doing a mythic raid, you're always going to want two good ones over one elite one. But if you're doing something where only one thing on the fight can kill you, or one thing in the dungeon can kill you, then maybe having the Omega one's a choice. But for most people, it's not really going to be a real choice. And then Sanctified Plates have been nerfed. Again, that corresponded with a nerf to pretty much everybody on avoidance. But again, this is another defensive nerf. I talked at the top about the versatility for a reason. It's because we're going to get to this point as well. And with that versatility nerf, we've lost defensiveness. And we've lost defensiveness because of Aegis of Protection. And we lost defensiveness because of Sanctified Plates. And Ret has lost a lot of defensiveness. We're still in a better spot than where we were, but that's like not saying very much. So this is a very, like, people are, I even have people commenting saying, no, we're still tanks. And it's like, yeah, we're not weak, like we're not paper like we used to be, but we're going away from, again, what they said. They said they want plate classes to feel like they're a little bit tankier. And we're kind of going away from that. And I don't think the other plate classes have had the same kind of things happen to them in the same way, where like every single part of their defensive kit had just been ticked away a little bit like it has Ret. And I get it, Ret was really, really strong, but like you could get rid of Ret being so strong by like doing one thing instead of doing all these things. And I guarantee you, they are not thinking about the versatility thing at all. That's not even going through their minds. So I try to talk about it. That's all I can do. But that's not going through their minds at all. Then he's going to talk about mobility, the whole thing I just talked about, the mobility thing. Unintuitive interactions. This is another thing that we talk about on the channel, right? A number of new talents have effects that are unintuitive and anti-synergetic with interactions. Radiant Glory removes the Avenging Wrath ability, and instead it has Wake of Ashes, but it doesn't work with Divine Wrath. That's something that we've directly talked about here. There's also some awkward timing with Execution Sentence. This duration is 12 seconds with Will, and both Radiant Glory and the new tier set bonus lasts 8 seconds. You could delay Wake of Ashes until 4 seconds, but this would feel absolutely terrible to play with. I agree, you would never want to do that. Hero talent effects, Radiant Glory. So he mostly talks about this. I think there's some other unintuitive things. I'd have to pull up the talent tree and look through it. I wasn't really prepared to. I thought maybe he would mention. I know there's at least one more unintuitive thing. But yeah, there's at least 2 cases of unintuitiveness within our talent tree. But this is definitely the most impactful one for Season 1 of The War Within, for sure. And then final notes. Overall, the changes we've seen so far seem to be split into types. Changes focus on Ret's issues specifically, such as secondary stats or AoE changes. May not be a perfect approach, but overall tend to improve Ret's gameplay. This is true. It's better overall for us to have mastery scaling. It's better overall for us to have cleave talents. At least then they can get buffed if they're not strong enough. At least they exist. At least we have a cleave talent now. So those are wins, right? Or the Blessed Champion change from 2 points to 1 point. That's a win. That's good. That helps us. It makes Ret better. But then changes made for class decisions, such as Ret aura being removed, so Paladins don't have 2 auras, or Crusader's Reprieve being removed because all melee got it removed, even though Ret was told you're getting the range because you're not getting movement. None of the other classes were told that. We were told that. Ret, you're getting the range, but we're not touching your movement. That's something to remember. I'll before I give my final thoughts, my final notes, like if you're gonna make a forum post, talk about that. Talk about Crusader's Reprieve, and we were told about the movement thing, and then also mention the versatility thing that I'm talking about. Say Reds are playing, especially in Mythic guilds, right? Like high-end guilds, Reds are playing with over 30% versatility, and now Mastery is good, which is good for us, but we're losing a ton of damage reduction going from Dragonflight to the War Within. And that is not being accounted for on these little nerfs to our defensive toolkits here and there. It's not being talked about at all. And so you see Ret like in the top 3 of like survival DPSs. It's like Rogue, Warlock, Ret, and it depends on the fight, right? We're better on AoE damage fights because of our how strong Sanctified Plates was essentially. Made us really, really good for those. And then we have some defenses for like some direct hits as well. So basically, let's just say we're like a top 3 defensive DPS in the game. I don't expect us to be last by any means, but I expect that to fall precipitously right now in the War Within, like maybe even to bottom 3rd. I think midway would be like a safe guess, but I'll be a little bit more inflammatory and I'll say like bottom 3rd. I wouldn't be surprised because it's so much of a verse. I mean, I can tell because I've been playing so lazy in Dragonflight with all my verse, and I could just take stuff. And then on the beta, even if I'm fighting like low stuff, like good luck. Here's the perfect thing: go into delves as a Ret Paladin compared to some of these other classes, like solo into a delve and go into like a high level one and see how fast you get absolutely smoked and destroyed by stuff. You can't take a hit. It's rough. It's definitely rough. And so again, we're not as weak as we were before because we were one of the weakest. Like we were like at the bottom, like where Boomkin was like in the last tier. We were like down there, and we're not down that far. Probably. I don't know. A lot of people got stronger with hero talents and stuff, and we only get stronger if we're Templar as far as defensive goes. So, yeah, it definitely talk about that. Talk about versatility changes and how that affects defensiveness. Talk about like things that they promised essentially that they're going back on, and then talk about the Retribution aura. So be like, hey, we understand you don't want to give us Retribution aura, but you need to give us something that we bring uniquely to the raid, like a Blessing of Spell Warding, right? At least put us on the same level as a prop paladin, right? Because right now we bring nothing unique. So those would be the 3 things, right? If I wanted to take 3 things only, 3 things right there. Talk about the versatility thing. Nobody's talking about it. Talk about the range versus mobility thing because that's something they promised us. And then talk about how Ret brings nothing unique to a group because Retribution aura has been removed. And something as simple as Blessing of Spell Warding would at least bring us something unique. At least prop paladins and Ret paladins would be on the same level on that one. So that's what I would talk about there. So again, my final thoughts on this is I think he pretty much covered everything. Now he's, once again, I think Bolas covers things a lot from a raid perspective. I would say in Mythic Plus, really my only fear right now in Mythic Plus is that we are, it might be some of that defensiveness or lack of defensiveness that we might have, especially with how unmelee friendly some of these Mythic Plus dungeons are. That would be my only real worry for Mythic Plus. I think we're set up very well for Mythic Plus right now. I think a lot of the changes that they've done for Ret have specifically helped AoE. You know, like, and I think Herald of the Sun is, as long as it's tuned correctly, is going to be very good for AoE. I think if you're pulling a ton of mobs, Ret is going to be very, very good. It doesn't, and if even if it's like one pull, right? If you do one big pull in a dungeon where you pull 2 or 3 groups together and pop Bloodlust or whatever, Ret is going to be very good on those pulls. You know, depending on tuning, of course, but like we have all the tools to be very, very, very good on those pulls. So I think Mythic Plus we're kind of set up to be okay. And then I think I'm a little bit scared for Raid, honestly, because they nerfed our cleave stuff. So we might, you know, it might be more effective to just AoE or single target still. That's a real threat in Raid still. And again, some defensiveness lost via versatility plus minor things. Yeah, and I feel like when I play, at least I like hitting Hammer of Light, for example, but I feel like there's some lacklusterness on the single target front and in like the raid environment front, at least as far as I can tell. It also could be because the raid is very unmelee friendly in general as well. Like a lot of the bosses are extremely non-melee friendly. So yeah, that would be kind of some of my thoughts there. But yeah, like I said, I overall agree here. And I wanted to do this video because Bolas and I agree on a lot of this stuff. And I think if you take somebody like me who's kind of like theory crafting, playing the game, like how it feels, then you take someone who's like doing the math essentially, right? Like mathematically, this doesn't make sense and whatever. Like that's what he's doing a lot of the time. And yeah, like both those people are agreeing on things. I think that says a lot. Now, we're probably both fairly intelligent people, so we could also just be coming to the same conclusions because of that as well. But yeah, it's like these things are real issues, and hopefully at least some of them can get addressed, because even if all of them can't get addressed, right? That would be my hope here. So always give feedback, be constructive in your feedback. Like don't be like, hey, you freaking idiots. Like if you're going to write a forum post, and I'll write one up. I'll try to write one up before the pre-patch launches. But if you're going to do a forum post or something like that in the feedback, don't be like, hey, you idiots, we're losing versatility, so now we're going to die. Like at least like try to like say it intelligently or whatever if you're going to give that feedback. But I'll be giving some feedback, and hopefully they can see it or whatever. I you know, hopefully at some points people have seen my videos as well. I think devs have seen my videos in the past. I'm pretty sure they have, at least a couple times. So hopefully maybe there's somebody who somebody who works there sees it and tells the dev to watch it or something like that. Hopefully that's the case too. And we can get some of these things improved, especially the most important things that affect us all the time, right? It's not always about being the strongest. It's about like having stuff feel correct and not being dumb at the end of the day. So I'll call that quits on this one. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel because that helps me out a lot. If you are already subscribed to the channel, I do encourage you to check out the Patreon. And other than that, everybody have a good one.